Right, morning, morning. Welcome, Paul. Hope you've got your best jigsaw puzzle hats on this morning, because I think we're talking about rebuilding shattered economies or something, Lee. So not too sure how we put the pieces together, but yeah, I'm sure you've got some thoughts to kick us off. So over to you.
Thanks, Ivan. So we're picking up the theme from the virtual trade fair, which is how do we build a shattered economy? And so it was a great question to think about. And of course, there are no easy answers. But when I sort of thought right from the beginning, okay, where do you start? I can understand why so many of the speakers at the virtual trade fair started with because when the context seems so dire, what does it take for you to move forward? There has to be something in you that ensures that you can keep going and that you don't fall into this vortex of despair and awfulness. So I do think that the importance of our own hope, positiveness, our sense of our belief in things will work out, and our that gumption, that true grit that says I will make it happen, and then actually doing something about it. So I do think that plays a very important part. And then a lot of the speakers on Thursday spoke about the fact that we mustn't rely on government, that we must go ahead, we've got to forge ahead, don't think government's going to be there to help you. But when I heard Francois Botha's figures, and when I read articles about how did the economy actually recover after previous downturns, and why did it sometimes lag, is because of lack or either the lack of government intervention or the government actually doing something to stimulate the economy. So I do think that there's a role that government plays. Europe at the moment is in a better place because governments have chosen stimulus packages. What we can do about that, I don't know. We're just talking about how to rebuild a shattered economy. And I wanted to offer a different perspective, that I think government is important and they do have a role to play. And then the last two things I want to mention is about business itself. And in a shattered economy and where we are now, you have to relook at your products and services. And there are a number of stories of people who've adapted through lockdown. And even though it might have been appropriate and relevant in lockdown, what's happened is, as we've come out of lockdown, how they adapted has now actually become their new business model. And it's showing that things have changed. And so we must keep looking for those adaptations. So the two that I think of is, the one is a restaurant owner. He owned 86 public. So if you know that, there were 3 or 4 restaurants, all closed down during COVID. They did not survive. And he is now doing deliveries of alcohol. And now that people are having alcohol delivered to their homes, I can't see that changing. People are, yes, they're still going to want to go out eventually, but I think that party and knowing, choosing off the menu, I think that's going to be an ongoing. He's certainly really thriving in that business. And the other is my Pilates instructor, who I used to go to the little gym up the road and used to do Pilates once a week. When lockdown happened, put all her classes online. And when gyms were allowed to go back, she said, you know, she'll do a mix. She'll do online and back to gym. I spoke to the other day. I said, well, are you going back to gym? She said, actually, no. She said, I've got more clients online now than I ever did at the gym. And even people that were signed up, she's got more people coming to class because they don't have to factor in travel. So even somebody who's sitting in the office, they would have phoned her and said, oh, Louis, I can't get there, so I'm going to miss this week. But now they're actually taking their gym clothes to the office, doing gym there remotely, and then going home. So those things are adapting. So that's the one thing. The other thing that I wanted to, and I know I'm saying a lot, but I've thought about it. So the other thing is listen to a YouTube clip of somebody saying, 2 things will always sell in an economic downturn. The one is luxury goods, because the rich will always remain rich. So if you are in the luxury market, you will, so that's a good market to be in. And then the other market is the opposite end of the scale, and that is staples. And then the third thing I want to say about products and services is the mix between digital. Yes, digital is definitely flying off the shelves at the moment. I'm working with an educational app at the moment, and they have tripled their business in the last couple of months. But there's going to be a swing. People are going to be tired. I had 2 face-to-face meetings yesterday, and there is nothing to replace face-to-face. So the experience is going to also play a part. And then the last thing that I want to say about rebuilding a shattered economy is selling. I've been somebody who constantly says, you have to sell. You can't sit back. You have to sell. But I am experiencing that selling is happening slightly differently at the moment. High trust relationships are vital. People are definitely price sensitive, and you must be answering a direct need. So yeah, I can see 13 chat messages. I'm not sure if you heard a single thing of what I was saying, but I am happy to have just started the conversation. So maybe you can carry on.
Great, thanks, Lee. Yeah, I think it's interesting, you know, whether any of the elements that you've said are actually new, or whether it's just back to basics, as we were saying the other day. You know, it's yes, there's change definitely, but do the fundamentals change? Do the basics change? I'm not too sure that they ever really do in some ways. But I think, seeing that we're talking about economies, we better go to our resident accountant first. So Ed, over to you.
Yeah, before I say what I was going to say, just picking up on something that Lee said, that was about the stimulus packages. And I think it's very interesting that we don't know what businesses are going to survive and what are going to fail, but government are backing businesses. Now, what we do know is that people will still be there no matter what happens. So why aren't the stimulus packages for people? So we could have it, for example, universal income. So rather than protecting a job, protect an income. And then if one sector disappears, it doesn't matter. That's my first thought. And what I really wanted to say was a quote from the Bible, actually. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the wind blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And that's all about building your house on sand. And I think what we've seen recently is what happens when you get a shock. And I think building the new economy has to be resilient. And I think it has to factor in climate change and our dysfunctional relationship with nature, which is where COVID came from. So it's caused all sorts of different things to happen. For example, in the UK, we have the established supermarkets, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Morrison's and Asda, and we have two challengers, Aldi and Lidl. Now, the challengers were doing really, really well, and they were gaining ground on the traditionals. COVID came along. The challengers don't have an internet presence. The traditionals do. So the challengers have lost the ground that they were gaining because of the change in how we shop. In another area, in banking, there's the traditional high street banks, and there's the challenger banks like Starling, Resolute, Atom, which are online. The online banks were struggling to make any progress because they hadn't got a high street presence. Well, all of a sudden COVID came and no one goes to the high street bank anymore. So the challenger banks, who are dependent on the internet, are succeeding. So that we have two conflicting things, one succeeding because of the internet and one failing because of the internet. So I think going forward, and if you think that climate change is too far ahead to affect your business, it's happening now. In the UK, in various cities, even small cities, for example, Bristol and Exeter in the southwest, they're introducing clean air zones because of pollution, which means if you've got a van, a diesel van, you cannot drive through that zone. So if you're a plumber, if you're a gardener, if you're a mobile dog grooming business, you can't drive through that zone. So your business is impacted. So as we move forward, climate change initiatives will impact business. Not the climate change itself, that will later on, but today, tomorrow, next week, climate change initiatives. And we've just had yesterday the biodiversity summit at the UN, where 63 countries signed up to biodiversity agreements. Those will impact business tomorrow, the next day. So I think we need to make sure that we're looking at how we weather those storms, those floods, those winds, all the changes that come. We need to be resilient. We need to have multifaceted businesses so that if one facet fails, the other facet can take over. And it's perhaps thinking about investing in people, not investing in plant and machinery necessarily, because people can adapt. A hunking great bit of metal is a bit difficult to repurpose. You can quite easily repurpose a human being. So that's my thoughts.
Right, thanks, Ed. Yeah, lots of interesting elements and challenges on the horizon, I'm sure. So let's go to Trevor Carty next.
Good morning, all. How do you rebuild a shattered economy? It's the same way you build a shattered ankle or a shattered wrist or a shattered knee. First thing you do is you have to get a specialist to have a look at the shatter and the break and I think that's our biggest challenge, is finding the specialists in it, and where the shatter is the biggest, so the challenge is, do we have those specialists? And Lee, I think government's got a bigger role to play than we give them credit for. But it's also us, the specialists. We've got a bigger role to play with the government, because the time of the public-private partnership has never been more opportune. But I want to talk about price taking and price making. I think when you've gone through what we've gone through, I think the businesses that are going to come through this are the ones that have realized that they can no longer be price makers. They've got to be price takers. And it's how they then cut their product accordingly. So in the financial services business, We've seen a lot of movement over this last 6 months period to companies that actually got involved in supporting the economy and the policyholder when things went tough. For example, in level 5, we didn't move our cars 1 inch, and yet a lot of the insurers collected full premiums. Now that's just theft. And then there were 1 or 2 companies that said, hey, hold on, this is wrong. If you give us your business, we will cut that premium accordingly. And then they started getting clever, and they came up with products like the 1,000-kilometer product. So if you do less than 1,000 kilometers, because all of a sudden you don't have to go to Pretoria every day to do your work, you can do it just as effectively from behind a computer screen. Just like you said, the Pilates instructor. I mean, it's absolutely true. So so the move from price making to price taking is definitely there. I've been dealing with a group of professionals in the healthcare space, and they're all surgeons. And the hospitals have for many years dictated to them how much medical malpractice liability insurance they have to have. And it's usually 30 million or 50 million, depending on your discipline. And in this period, a lot of them haven't been able to get into theater and operate and make a living that they used to because of COVID. Recovery beds have been allocated to COVID. Theaters have been set aside for COVID. And so I think adaptation and innovation is critical. So if you can find those specialists who are prepared to change their thinking, because this is here for some time to come. We don't know who's going to survive, but as Ed says, people will always be there. Ed, you should have a look up the UBU unit, UBU. It is exactly what you say. It's a universal unit of currency. It is a South African unit of currency. And if you really want to get clever, register on Jacaranda radio show and get your own UBU wallet. And you can spend your UBUs at a number of places in South Africa. So yeah, innovation, it's going to be key. Price making versus price taking is going to be key. And then just reviewing everything that's not essential. We really have got so much stuff and clutter that consumes not only our time and space, but our money. And yeah, that's my 2 cents worth for the day.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, I think one of the questions that comes to mind, I mean, you speak about needing the specialists, and we certainly need to, I think, replace the specialists that got us into the mess in the first place with new ones, because you know, you keep those same ones on, we're just going to go back into the same old cycles unless they radically change, which you know, I have my doubts as whether they can or not. But you know, right. So Steve, let's get across to you next.
Thanks, Ivan. You caught me furiously typing. Yeah, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination. So I tend to try and reserve my comment as much as possible when it comes to talking about building and rebuilding and shaping economies, etc. But I do think that these kinds of crises that we face do give us golden opportunities to rethink things and to reimagine things. And I think it's a fear response when we want to revert back to something. And so if the conversation, not necessarily here, but that I hear sometimes with other people, the rebuilding is to reclaim what we've lost, I think that that's a mistake. I think we have to look forward and build forward to something better than what we had. I like Ed's comments, I think, around the really coming to grips with our ecological worldwide crisis that's upon us. But there's a number of them, I think. There's societal crisis, there's financial crisis, and they're quite intertwined from what I can see. And so I think we need to be brave enough to forge something of a new path forward. I do think specialists are to blame in some ways in terms of getting us where we are here. But at the same time, I think there's a dynamic relationship between the specialists and the people doing all of the drinking of the Kool-Aid that the specialists are putting out there. And so I don't think it's as easy to just go, well, let's just lynch all the specialists. I'd like to. There'd be a couple that I could put like quite high up on the list. but I think we all play a role in terms of you know, what we consume and how we consume, etc., in terms of how an economy turns over. And I am trying to rethink some of how I consume and how I spend my life and what I'm willing to put money on and not put money on, etc. Because I'm challenged by the opportunity here to try and be different on the other side of this pandemic. You know, specifically stop eating bats for one.
Yeah, we all go bets on that one, but yeah. So yeah, I think I agree with you, Steve. I don't think we need to lynch the specialists, but maybe lynch the Kool-Aid drinkers instead. I think might be a better idea. So, you know, those are perhaps, yeah, perhaps, I don't know. Right, Una, let's come across to you next.
Sorry, I was just looking something up that I wanted to share, and then you caught me a bit off guard. Yeah, morning, everyone. I was thinking about, I don't know if you know this, Sinefin, I don't know if I say it right, Sinefin complexity, those 4 quadrants, which I think is quite interesting when you mentioned bringing in the specialists earlier. I was also saying, you know, what are the specialists going to do? I'm not always too sure that the specialists know what they're doing and are always the right people, that sometimes they are the ones that got us into trouble. And when you look at that framework of Sinefin, so then you've got the obvious quadrant where things are sort of and that's all around complexity and chaos. So on the one hand, you have the obvious where everything is ordered, and then on the extreme end, you have the chaotic. And then the second part is the complicated part where it's sort of still, yeah, I'll have to read up again to remember exactly, but that's the place where you would go and find good practice. If you're in that sort of environment, you would then call in the specialists. They would sense what's happening, they would analyze, and then they'll respond to good practice. When you're in a complex environment, no one really knows what's going on. You're going to probe, and then you're going to sense and respond, and then the practice that's going to come up is emergent. So I would say we're more in between the complex and the chaotic. And in the chaotic, that's where novel practice comes up, where we act, sense, respond. So we're probably more in the complex space, where I think there's a new practice, emergent practice that needs to come up. So we need to start looking at new ways of doing things. And I think both the individual and government plays a role, but we can't always rely on government. So it's, I think, up to individuals to develop themselves and to do what they need to do to come up with new ideas. And we're doing that in any way. So often when I think about things getting really chaotic and getting out of control, then I just think back on human history and people in the end, when things really get tight, just getting very creative and get together and find solutions. And I think that's what we need to happen again.
Sure, thanks, Una. Now my thoughts are chaotically complex. Not too sure where to take us from there, but we better get across to Cecile after that, I think.
Morning, guys. Yes, I actually watched my company's, my network marketing company's online sensation last night. I really watched that. And just what Steve said about, what was it, whatever, that Jacaranda has. My network marketing company, and it's so silly that all 55 million in South Africa doesn't belong to it, because, well, and a few million across the world, Ed. It is the network marketing company has partnered with, it's 18 years old and has partnered with 50 countries currently, and a big and small business. So big business in South Africa is your Checkers, the Skem, Tiger Wheel and Tire, Golfers Club, those kind of companies, Dis-Chem. And the smaller businesses are your pharmacy, your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker, your insurance company, your every single industry that you can think of. And when you use them, you earn cash back and you earn shopping points that you can use at any of the other merchants for specials that they have. So cash, and then you can use or do online purchases and you could do offline purchases. And what they are encouraging people to do is to, if you are going to buy your groceries, rather buy your groceries at Fruit Stop in Pretoria, at the small business, not so small anymore, or at Eagles Fruit and Veg, or you go to the local pharmacy, because when you spend your money at the small businesses, you put money back into the local economies. So you don't have to change whatever products you are buying. You just buy what you want to buy from the allocated, dedicated shops, and you get your cash back. So yeah, so that's definitely how to fix the broken economy. Every single person in South Africa and in the world can use the services. So yeah, so that's definitely how I would promote healing the broken economy, because as you say, people must use from the smallest commodity, toilet paper, to the biggest commodity, buying luxury goods, a yacht, a car, a Harley Davidson, any of those things. So yeah, that's definitely my contribution.
Great, thanks, Cecile. Yeah, I think getting money to circulate in a local economy definitely is one of the ways, and how can we do more of that is a really good point. So thanks for that. Right, Jasper, let's come across to you next.
Morning. I might be interrupted now because I'm sitting in the office and I see a car just came in. But coming back to the topic, whatever the solution is, it's going to have to be worked out and experientially tried. And my mind went back to 1994 for ourselves here in South Africa. And when I started to work in places like Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. And when I went to Uganda the first time in 1994, they basically just came out of their last big world war. I just have to take a order here. Can we take a break here and then go over to someone else?
Okay, no problem. Donovan, are you able to join us?
Yes, morning. Thanks, Trevor. Morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to be a bit economical with words today, my contribution. I'm just thinking in terms of the state that we're in, it's better to demolish and then start from scratch and rebuild. As you do with a construction project, you remove, you demolish, you break down whatever you don't want, and then you rebuild, and come up with a new structure. And to do it at a global scale, it doesn't help if you just look at the local economy and then you don't look at the global picture. Okay, that's my contribution. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Donovan. You surprised me. Economical with words, you? I wouldn't have thought. But yeah, thanks so much for that. Right, yeah, I think it's excellent. You can't simply create things out of nothing. So you've got to start somewhere. And yeah, I like that idea of breaking down and rebuilding. Sometimes you do need to start new. So let's get across to Trevor now.
Right, this one had me thinking, and I went back again to the 10 speakers at Virtual Trade Fair because the focus there was rebuilding a shattered economy, and I tried to get to understand why they focused so much on the humanness and the individual instead of the powers that be that could help lead people out of the problems they're in. And that's what brought me to the Einstein quote. You can't use the same people to get you out of the mess that they got you into, as far as I'm concerned. So it's got to be other thinking. And the three things that I focused on, because I keep thinking they've got to be important 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What are the most important 1, 2, 3 things we've got to do right now? So to apply it to what's going on, I tell you what affected my mind over the course of that day and over the weekend was this: change your focus, change your perception, change your reality. And that we can do that on a macro basis. So I'd like to offer that as something to our government leadership, or whatever specialist is going to get in there. Just completely change the focus that we've got, that's been broadcast out on the media. Create another media channel, for instance, with a rule of Botha, or individuals that are focused on the great things that are happening in our economy. Where are our Peter Diamanduses locally? Could it be a rule of Botha? Can we double check those? Can we grow them? The African economics idea, is there merit in that? Okay, now put that together. So if African economics could be the way to go, what is the simple 1, 2, 3 that we can apply out of African economics? And the word Ubuntu came out of this, which just married with the humanness and that theme that went out there. So I ended up with the thought, well, it's about getting back to basics, and I'm always about getting back to basics. And the question that I'm posing here, Lee, hopefully you're going to pick it up. What are the most important 1, 2, 3 priorities for my life? And then if we've got to be thinking about others, what do we believe is the most important 1, 2, 3 things for others in their lives, whether they are in townships or not? And one of the things I did was to go back to regional work that I did 20 to 30 years ago. And a guy came up for me again that really helped my thinking 30 years ago. His name was Paul Pilzer. So if you've never studied Paul Pilzer's work, he came up with the concept of unlimited wealth. And he was one of the primary foundations for Anthony Robbins to launch his, what can you remember what it was called, Ivan? The book, his first book, Anthony Robbins. I think it was
Awakening the Giant Within.
Awaken the Giant Within, that is correct. And one of the people that he referred to was this young Senator Paul Pilzer, and where he was going. So I was looking to see where he's gone, and I could only catch him up to about 2016. But what he reminded me of was he was one of the first to recognize that new technologies, while they actually strip people of jobs, that is actually what grows an economy, because those people, they tend to come up with unique entrepreneurial ideas for actually growing economies. And economies grow off the back of people who have lost their jobs and suddenly realize, hey, I've got to do something new, and that creates new thinking. And I don't like this idea of universal basic income. So I'd love to get in and study why people are going down this route of universal basic income, because there's something about it. If you give a man a fish, in other words, you give them the coins, are you stymieing their ability to actually come up with something entrepreneurial? I don't know. So I'm just throwing that into the mix, and I'd love to know what the counter argument to universal basic income is, and why my gut says, I don't think that's right to give people the money. Give them the opportunities all out there to actually go and do the things that they can do. 1, 2, 3. So what is the first 1, 2, 3 that is important to most people? The basics of life. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm confused.
All right, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to switch back to Jasper.
All right. back to my story. When I went to Uganda the first time in 1994, I made the normal sort of desktop study to say what would be the average earnings of people in South Africa versus the average earnings of people in Uganda. And we already came up against price resistance here in South Africa, and I couldn't see how, let's say the average earning of a professional was 3,000 those days, and of a professional in Uganda was 300 Rand. And I struggled to see how will we even make a dent in that kind of economy. And driving from the airport into Kampala, I observed was literally one huge squatter camp all the way to Kampala. And then we had some more modern buildings and stuff. And I looked at all of this and I thought, where's the economy in this whole thing? But by the end of that week, we launched the Uganda business, and the leaders who were with me somewhere along the week picked up on this, and they said, listen, your job is just to give us the opportunity. We will make the business happen. And I later then understood what they were saying, because at that time, they just came out of a civil world war that ended in 1992. So it was first Idi Amin, and then after him, another guy, and then the current president took over. But the whole country, and that was true for most of Africa, even Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, well, not Rwanda, Rwanda had another challenge, but total corruption. You cannot do any conventional business if you're not a friend or a family member of the president or some of the big people. And what they were looking for is a fair opportunity, because human nature says, just give me a fair environment, then I'll show you what I can do. So that was basically the story that I experienced, people looking for a fair opportunity. And it also served the need, because the whole struggle to get medicine and stuff into any of those countries, if you're rich, you then fly yourself out or someone out and get hospital treatment in a neighboring country. So the preventative healthcare was very important to them, and that was the space that we were operating in. Then later on, I also saw just the proliferation of alternative banking, and it's very successful in Kenya, the M-Pesa, where people could now trade with one another in very rural areas. So as long as you give people the tools to trade and have fairness, things happen. But then I want to conclude with the fact that all of these improvements in the various countries happens initially with pockets within society, not government-led. Government mess things up, but pockets of individuals within society, and then they identify a need and they start focusing on that need and they move forward. And then later on, it becomes national priority. And then politicians are very clever. When they see where the population is going, then they put themselves in front of it and say, that's what I've done for you. So I think the only way we're going to, and eventually you do get quality politicians. I've been the privilege to also go to Rwanda, and where they come out of a horrific event, the pride, the national pride restored in that country, and the cleanliness of the streets, where and they went back to simple things like once a month, everybody from the highest to the lowest must be in the streets and cleaning up their environment. And it's that kind of simple things that make people feel, hey, we all have a role to play. So it's not going to be one big thing that someone do somewhere. It will be the buildup of multiple little things that will be society-led, pockets of society, but it has to be basically fair, and it must serve a need. And I think that'll be my contribution.
Great, thanks, Jasper. Yeah, I think lots of good points in there. And yeah, just a quick wrap up from my side, because we've gone 40 minutes already on this one. So it's quite amazing how time flies when you're having fun. But yeah, I think governments should have a very limited role to play in anything. I think, they have an oversight role. They perhaps have a legislative role to a point. But I think if you can dismantle many of the draconian controls and processes that governments put in place around the world, not only in places like South Africa, you free up the people to be creative, you free up the people to create businesses, you free up the people to build an economy. And I just think of stories even out of places like Australia. You go and try and be an entrepreneur in Australia. It's damn difficult. Yes, you can go and get a corporate job there and do quite well if you're a corporate type animal. But as an entrepreneur, I know a number of people who've gone over there as very successful entrepreneurs from South Africa, and they've had their life savings wiped out trying to get something going there because all the hoops they've got to jump through. And for me, that's the way you kill creativity, you kill entrepreneurial spirit, and you kill just the possibility of really growing something from those thoughts and those people. So yeah, so for me, I really think governments are way too top heavy. And way too dominant in marketplaces. I don't think governments know how to run economies, to be perfectly honest. I don't think they should be involved in running economies. They should simply be there to do the little bits and pieces that they can do, because I think most businesses and most people, given the right environments, will actually really build economies properly. So those are my thoughts. So Lee, back to you to wrap up for the morning. Tell us what's on the cards for tomorrow.
Chaos reigns. Chaos and complexity. And Wisdoms is all about 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So how do we, and I know, Trevor, this is where you were, you were directing. Okay, so let's pick up on Trevor's question. What are the 1, 2, 3 things we do? What do we do now as individuals, and what do we want others to do? What are the 1, 2, 3 priorities in terms of building the economy? We're a part of this economy. We have financial needs. We are citizens of nations. So we have a role to play. Jasper's word, we are a pocket. Wisdom's chats, Wisdom's itself, your business entity, your person, each of us is a pocket in some way. So what are the 1, 2, 3 things out of this complexity and chaos? How do we see the light? And if we use Michael Jackson's illustration from his talk of not seeing the darkness of the tunnel, but we focus on the light, what is going to get us to that light? The 1, 2, 3 things. So let's be practical tomorrow in thinking about that.
So Lee, I think you've given us practically an impossible task, but anyway, we'll have to see what everybody comes with. Put your hands.
You know what, I come up with the idea. I haven't done the thinking yet, so.
So put your hands in your pockets and see what you can find. So have a great day further, folks, and we'll see you on the morning. Go well. Cheers.
Okay, bye.